Comics Are Dope, the podcast is brought to you by Fight or Flight Comics, located at 6320 Capitol Boulevard in the Plantation Square Shopping Center. They've been my LCS for over 5 years, and I trust them for all of my comic book needs. So go to the shop, visit Dan, Emily, or Max. They will make sure they get you squared away. And let them know I sent you. You might even get a discount on your purchase. By the way, if you start a subscription pull box, all pull list customers get 10% off every purchase they make in the store. So why not become a subscriber? Go to Fight or Flight Comics in Raleigh, North Carolina, or visit their Instagram. Links in the show notes down below. All right, so my next guest is really special. This is a special one for me. I don't know how many of you guys saw, but I put up a community post about a comic publisher, and I said, hey, if anyone knows anyone involved with this, send them my way. I'd love to interview them. And none of you guys reached out to me, so I don't know what's going on. We got an issue here, but through my own research, I was able to find Mr. Roosevelt Pitt, the creator of Purge, and he is here to talk to me about the 30th anniversary campaign to bring some issues of Purge back to print and back into your hands after 30 years. So I am really, really excited to welcome our next guest, Mr. Roosevelt Pitt. How are you, sir?
Thank you. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. I've looked forward to this conversation since we actually decided to have this podcast interview. So I'm here, as they say, with bells on.
Awesome, man. Thank you. Yeah, and we talked a little bit offline, but I guess just to give further context, right? Like I'm in my early 30s, and for me, I was a student of history first, right? Like my major is African American studies. I just have fun doing these sorts of research projects. And so for me, I got into comics about 5 years ago. And as I'm getting deeper into comics and reading the stories that are coming out currently, I'm going back in the past and doing research on other stories, right? And I had a period where there was just a ton of me trying to get into, like, who were the Black creators? Who were the Black comics characters? Who was here for us, right? And I stumbled on Milestone, and my viewers know, like, we've talked about that. We've interviewed a few creators from there. And then, of course, as part of that research, I hear about ANIA because a lot of the press references you guys together, and because you guys basically came to publishing at the same time. And so it was like me doing this research. I'm like, wow, there are different approaches. There's all these different companies. And it's like, well, if these people are still walking the earth, I would love to talk to them and sort of document these stories on this platform. So I'm really, really excited to have you here.
Well, again, I'm looking forward to sharing my experience and hope that it will help fans as well as potential creators who want to delve into the world of comic books because things have changed since 1991, not 92, when I started with Purge, but I actually started creating my own comic books back around 1988 when I decided that that's what I wanted to do as far as a career and to fulfill my own personal goals and purpose.
Awesome. So what was the impetus for you to jump in and say, this is what I want to do?
Well, for me, it was quite simple, at least from my standpoint. I wanted to produce positive Black superheroes. Now, I know that can be somewhat of a cliche to some degree, but for me, it was a way to present foundation of Black American culture in the most positive light without relying on stereotypes. For me, I've always felt that when it comes to Black superheroes, even though I enjoyed certain heroes from the mainstream comic book companies, a lot of them delved into, drugs, or they were ex-cons and things of that sort. And of course, those things exist. But as a fellow North Carolinian, I'm assuming there are a lot of farmers in the area. So yep. I was a farmer's kid. I grew up cropping tobacco. That type of thing. So where was the representation for a Black person like myself, who's never been in a gang or been in that type of environment? Um, and again, there's nothing wrong with the environment of New York and LA, but that's something that I didn't know. So when I wanted to look at creating superheroes, I said to myself, well, what would be my purpose? And for me, is to show uh, Black Americans doing their best, being at the top of their game. And since we have so much history, you said that you are a student of history, we have the Ida B. Wells, we have the Malcolm X's, we have the Thurgood Marshalls, we have the Booker T. Washingtons. Where are the superheroes based on their backgrounds or their
Hmm.
fundamental sensibilities and philosophies? You see,
Hmm.
you didn't see that in comic books when it featured Black heroes, and I wanted to bring that specifically to the forefront.
Got you. And so you created Purge, who, and I grabbed Purge issue 0 on eBay a little while back. And thankfully, it didn't cost me an arm and a leg. And it seems it's well preserved. Like this issue, I don't know if the first person that had it even read it. It's in great condition. But um, what I love about Purge is like he gives his whole like spiel like as to why he's on his mission, his purification agenda. Um, and this line is what stands out to me. It says, "The city must be cleansed by a man not clouded by anger or hate, but by one motivated by his love for the people. And that's what pushes him to do what must be done, not because of honor or revenge, but because it's the right thing to do and the right time to do it." I think that's I just really encapsulates who the character is and his motivations. But I thought that was really awesome, right? Like I think a lot of times when we think about a superhero being good for the sake of good, the one that comes to mind is Superman. And it seems like everyone else has like whatever agenda. Batman's getting revenge because of his parents, or, maybe he's got daddy issues. I don't know. But
Right.
it's like everyone else seems to have some sort of hard edge about them and they're on a vengeful mission. But this is just a purity mission, really, like you said, doing what needs to be done because it needs to be done. Um, why was it important for that to be the portrayal?
Well, you really, said it even better than I could convey. I believe it's back to not having to rely on trauma.
Mm,
And Lord knows, as Black people, we have trauma. If you are descendant of slaves and that's your ancestry, there's nothing but trauma there.
mhm,
However, we also, as a group of people, Black people have always been the moral compass for this country. Those who are foundational Black Americans, descendants of slaves. And with that, we strive to do the right thing for the right reasons. And sometimes we have missteps, but as far as our culture is concerned as a whole, that's what we focus on.
mm,
So for me, I wanted to create a superhero who had that philosophy. And now I'm going to probably misquote it, so forgive me, but Martin Luther King Jr. said, if you see the good to do, you don't do it. You know,
mm,
that's evil.
right.
And again, forgive my misquote, but that's pretty much the gist of what he said. So that was a fundamental foundation that I wanted Purge to represent, as well as my own personal life.
Mhm,
And I wanted to interject that into the story.
mm,
And even though his story has evolved over time, that's still the basis of why he does what he does,
mm,
is to improve the city that he lives by purifying it of evils, but at the same time, purifying himself
mm,
also of some of the things that he has to overcome as far as his past that has been hidden from him.
mm,
So it all really ties in together about being the the right person for the right time for the right reasons.
mm. Now, you talked about being a farmer's kid. My grandmother was a farmer's kid, and she's told us all the stories about cropping tobacco and corn and
Right?
all the things. They're from down east, Onslow County. But yeah, like I guess for me, I'm a suburb kid. I grew up in Raleigh, and by the time I came around, my grandmother had lived in New York for like 30 years. So I don't have that experience of being a farmer's kid. What are some of the values that were instilled in you that even you carried until now?
Well, one of the biggest ones is entrepreneurship.
Mm,
I tell this story to my children. I'm not sure if they actually believe me or not. But as a side note, I have 5 kids, all adults.
mm,
Some of them is pretty much almost as old as you are. So
mm,
that being said, I always told them about my first entrepreneur. Um, uh, I guess when it comes down to seeking to do things on my own without having a boss or an overseer, that was my first foray, was planting cucumbers.
mm.
Okay. Now, back when I was growing up, they had cucumber markets where you can harvest your cucumbers, take them to the market, and sell them. So I decided to do that. I planted like 10 rows, got up in the morning around 5:30 before the sun came up,
Mhm.
got out there in the field, got my bucket, and harvest my cucumbers. Then my father said, "Well, son, looks like you got a lot here. I'll take you to the market." And I was around maybe 10 or 11 at that time.
Mhm.
And I raised about $60 to $70 for one visit. Now, for
Wow.
me, for that time, that was good money.
Yes.
So at that point, I realized that if I have a vision and I have a put together a business plan
Mhm.
and then do the work and rely on myself to take the initiative, and also have my own self drive to do what I needed to do, then the outcome could be not only profitable but rewarding.
Mm.
So for me, that allowed me as I got older to, of course, eventually build my own comic book company, and here I am today. So that was one of the major things that I was able to derive from it.
Got you. Now, were you a comic fan like just all through life growing up? And if so, what were some of your favorites?
Well, you hit on one of those right in the beginning when you talked about heroes who did the right thing for the right reason. You said Superman.
Mm-hmm.
That was my guy. Now, again, dating myself, when I was watching Superman, it was on a black and white television, George Reeves.
Mm,
And I tell this story a lot because it really helped to change my perspective about race, specifically how I saw myself and the differences in how we as Black people are portrayed versus our white counterparts.
mm,
And what I'm getting at is that when I watched George Reeves coming up on the screen, even though it was black and white, you know, uh, he was strong as a locomotive, faster than a speeding bullet, and up and away. Look, it's Superman.
mm,
And I remember looking at those visuals and the people looking up in awe. They revered him. They trusted him. He never lied. And no matter where he went, he was looked at not only as a protector, but a role model.
mm.
And I remember wrapping a towel around my neck, making a makeshift cape, like most
Mhm.
little boys would do, and running around. I'm flying, and then I remember stopping in front of a full length mirror that my mother had, and I stopped, and I'm having my arms out, and I'm flapping the cape, and I'm looking at the television, and I'm Superman, and then when he came up and they did a close shot, it hit me. Whoa, he's white. I don't look anything like this dude.
Yeah.
And then I felt disappointment. I
Mm.
felt lacking because I cannot do anything about this black skin. It is what it is. I'm going to
Right.
carry this until I die. So if I'm not able to change it, will I really be able to be Superman? You see? So that was my first, I guess, how I like to see it, realization. And since there was no character to look like me, who had that same type of personality, that same type of reverence, I always wondered, will there ever be a character that I could look up to? And that was what really catapulted me, even at a young age, to
Mm.
start creating characters and designing stories that would represent me, again, in a positive way, but also in a way that will have people look at me and say, wow, this is a great person. or now as I've gotten older and I've created these comic books for young Black boys to say, wow, I want to be like that hero.
Mhm.
And I believe no matter what race um, you are a part of, it's important to show your race at the best of their ability and the best that they can be. And for me as a creator, I find that to be my purpose and my responsibility to do that with my creations. And Purge is one of those who's on the forefront.
So when you decided that you wanted to, make this jump and be a comic book creator, how did you get started? What did you do? What did you do?
Well, that's also a wonderful story. Um, I was in college. For those who are from North Carolina, you said you went to UNCG. I went to A&T.
Mhm.
So I was an Aggie.
Yes, sir.
And I remember I graduated from high school in 84, went to A&T in 80, well, 84, 84, 85. And I remember around 86, I decided that I wanted to start my own company. I wanted to do comic books, but I wanted to find out exactly, is this a product that people wanted? So I took business classes, economics 101, supply and demand, and all that great stuff. And even though I learned a lot about how to run a business, I really still wasn't sure if what I was wanting to produce was really one needed and would be accepted by the masses. So one of the things I did was I went out with a recorder and a cassette tape, and I just stopped people on the side of the street. Most of them, of course, was on campus, but I would walk downtown and I would have my recorder and I would just stop people and I say, hey, look, I am doing a research on comic books, superheroes. I would like to ask you two questions. Can you name me a white superhero? Oh, yeah. Superman, Batman, Flash, Green Lantern, um, you know, um, uh, Doctor Strange, Thor, Captain America. I mean, and these are people who I knew didn't read comic books,
Right.
but they knew the characters, right?
Mhm.
So then I said, wow, that's a pretty lengthy list there. Okay. Second question, can you name me a black superhero? And you hear that bum, bum, bum music in your head because they just couldn't name one. And even though Black Panther and Luke Cage had been around, no one knew them in the
Mhm.
regular populace. If you were a comic book person, of course you would. But back then, as you know, comic books were on the newsstand. It wasn't comic book stores.
Right.
You see? So that was all I needed to hear, or in this case, not hear. And I
Mhm.
said, well, if no one knows a black superhero in the same way they know a white superhero, that means one, the mainstream companies who produce these black superheroes like Luke Cage, Black Lightning, Black Panther are not putting the marketing dollars behind those characters to get them to be well known as IPs, which means they're not important to them, other
Mhm.
than maybe helping to keep their bottom line at a certain level,
Right.
right? So that means it's up to me to do that. So that was what again countercultured me and put the drive in me to do my own thing in the way that I wanted to do it. And fortunately, Purge is still here 30 years later.
And so I don't know. I mean, I guess not to get too far into the weeds, but right, like I'm looking at Purge Zero here. So this was printed 1993. And like I said, it's really good quality. It's printed on like a pretty heavy newsprint. Um, the colors look good, like everything still looks great. There's even trading cards in here, like the whole nine. So it's like
Yeah.
a lot of times, even now, right, when we're looking at comics that come off a Kickstarter, a lot of times the product is inferior to what we might get from the big two publishers, Marvel and DC. Um, but in this case, that wasn't the case. This is a great quality book. There's even a Meteor Man ad on the back, right? So when we're talking about like putting a book together, I feel like there's a lot of different ways to do it, right? Like we can just go, me and you, let's get in the room, I'll draw, you write it, cool, bang, pow. We can go to the Xerox, staple it together, and that's a comic book, right? Um, But how do you go about finding the means of distribution and publishing um, back then? And was it easy for you?
No, it was not easy. I'll kind of rewind a little bit to something that you said about quality, and I want to
Mhm,
touch on that real quick. One thing that I did do in my research, because I was a comic book fan, I went to comic book shops or newsstands and looked at the quality. Then I asked questions. What type paper is this? What pound is this?
mhm,
How is it colored? Now, back when I was doing it in the 90s, it was color separation. There was no
mhm.
computer printing.
Right.
So you had to really make sure those color separation sheets were pristine, or
Mhm,
you can end up getting some weird color combination. So it was a little bit more trickier back then, but I did my research. So I wore a lot of hats. Now, primarily, I'm a writer. That's my thing.
mhm,
But majority of my journey, I've had to do the writing, the marketing, sometimes the editing. I have to do the research. I have to look for proper printers and all of those things. So one thing that I was determined to do is to match or surpass Marvel and DC or the mainstream.
mhm,
Because if my book is subpar, it's going to get looked over.
mhm,
Also, what I did when I started to develop my covers, I would literally take my cover before I decided that I'm going to utilize it, took it to a comic book shop or a newsstand and put it up there, and then
mhm.
step back and look at all the books that was on the shelf and say or determine, does my cover stand out? If it doesn't, I scrap it.
Right.
Because when you got people coming in looking at the product, they're going to look at whatever catches their eye. And that's when you know you have them. Plus, when they pick up the book and put it in their hand and start to thumb through it, half the battle's already won.
Mhm,
So those type of research was very important to me. Paper quality. So what you see in the 90s, that was meticulously done by me. Not only that, choosing the right artist as
mhm,
well,
mhm,
because I wanted to make sure that I and my product and my character Purge was the best, and he still is the best to
mhm.
this day. Now, moving forward, you know, one of the things that really made a big difference, I believe, in my journey, um, was to not just rely on regular distribution. Now, again, in the 90s, we had Diamonds distribution, who was still around. They were the
Mhm,
big boys. We utilized them, but we also had Black distributors with the Black bookstores.
mhm.
And that was more important to me because that's who I was really wanted to target.
Right.
Is my Black brethren, Black kids who normally wouldn't go to a newsstand because they felt there was nothing there for them.
Mhm,
So with myself and ANIA, we were able to cultivate those Black bookstores and that distribution
mhm,
and work with them to get our books in the hands of Black people who normally wouldn't have access to it through the mainstream means. So that was something that we did that was very precedented at the time. Now, unfortunately, the Black distributors are pretty much gone. If not, there are a few that are still around. So, and then of course now we have internet, we have Kickstarters,
mhm.
so we can distribute it ourselves now. If you got a Kickstarter and you got a decent fan base, they'll just order from you and you ship it, which is
Right.
cool, which is cool and very empowering. But that's what I did back then. And in addition, I also implemented what I call the back of my car, the trunk.
Mhm.
I literally had books in my trunk, and I drove around, whether I was doing conventions or trying to obtain media attention
Mhm.
with radio and television stations. But I literally would go around and walk into a grocery store because, again, newsstands were the thing. And hey, this is my book. I'd like you to carry it. So there was a lot of footwork back then that I
Right.
did.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you've touched on so many things that we've learned from so many great Black entrepreneurs, right? Like you're talking about quality control and market research. And what came to mind was Barry Gordy and the sandwich test, right? Like
Mm,
if you were down to your last $5, you gonna buy this album or you gonna buy a sandwich, right?
right.
So you're gonna buy my cover or the other cover.
Good example.
So that stood out to me. sell it out of the trunk, right? Like later on. Well, around the same time as you guys were doing this with comics, we started getting a lot of Southern rappers selling CDs out of their trunk, right? So Cash Money and No Limit, both based in New Orleans, both ended up getting huge distribution deals because they were able to prove that they moved so many CDs out of
Sure.
the trunks of their cars, just being regional and going to mom and pop stores. Um, and so there you are, right there in that same vein, in that same tradition. But something else you just touched on, right? ANIA. And
Yes.
what stands out to me about ANIA, I guess, again, just reading the history, but hearing it even firsthand from you, is the idea of cooperative economics, right? Like we just had the Epiphany Engine Kickstarter,
Mhm.
where something like 45 Black publishers just tossed all their characters in the ring, and they're going to be on this in this 200-page graphic novel that's coming out later or early next year. But they had to raise like $60,000, and they did it. And that was a great example of a lot of people coming together who stereotypically you might say it shouldn't have been able to happen, right?
Right. Mhm.
So you guys 30 years ago, I think when the Epiphany Engine Kickstarter was going, there were a lot of comparisons made to a bunch of different publishers from the past. But it reminds me most of your story in that ANIA was an association of a bunch of already freestanding publishers. You guys were independent of each other. You were working before and then decided to come together and become something bigger so that you could reach a bigger audience. How did that come about? How did you guys get in touch with each other?
Well, one of the things that happened was one, we were all over the place. Of course, I was in North Carolina. One of the founding members was in Atlanta. But the one who contacted me was Eric Griffin, and he
Hmm.
resided in California. He was the creator of Ebony Warrior. And at that time, been I just finished publishing Power Nights,
Hmm.
which was actually my first comic featuring a black superhero team who received their powers from unlocking their melanin.
Hmm. Wow.
And I had that book in one of the black distributorships.
Hmm.
Eric saw it, contacted me, and said, "Hey, Roosevelt, we can do more together than apart.
Hmm.
Okay, we can pull our resources, our money, our know-how, because we all are successful in separate ways. But I think we can do better together." So once we started talking on the phone, he brought in some other creators, Nabil Haj, Alonzo Washington, um, and we all got together and said, "You know what? I think we could do this." Right. And one of the things that I've always had a spiritual connection to, and I call it the Tulsa effect, Black Wall Street. You see, when we're not hindered, we as Black people come together and pull our resources, we can do amazing things. And Black Wall Street, Tulsa was a great example of that. And there were many others, Rosewood and Wilmington, the list goes on. If you're a historical buff, we had
Hmm.
a lot of Black um, communities that were thriving.
Yes.
So to me, it was drawing off of that ancestral energy, you know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
And so when the Nia was brought to me as a concept, I said, yeah, I want to do this, you know. And and once we got together, we said, okay, this is one of the things that we're gonna have to lay down as part of our foundation. Quality. The
Hmm.
art has to be pristine. When our books are on the shelf, it needs to look as good or better than the mainstream, you know.
Hmm.
But again, there were pitfalls. We were all independent, and we did not have white media money backing us. You
Hmm.
see, so we had to be very innovative, very smart in how we navigated our businesses as a team as well as individuals
Right.
to get the job done. And we did. We ended up selling for each book 1 million copies. Purge sold
Wow.
over 1 million copies when it first came out. That issue that you have there,
Hmm.
1 million of those were sold.
Wow.
And we were featured, as you probably know, Entertainment Tonight, Of course, Newsweek, the list goes on. So we made a huge impact, and I'm proud to say that we made a huge impact because we did it our way without having to um, uh, fall under white media control. You know
Hmm.
what I mean?
Yeah.
And that made our story, I feel, even more special.
Right. Right. No, for sure. Um, like just in doing research, right, a lot of the media coverage around ANIA at the time put you guys head to head against Milestone. I don't know like how much of that was just the media pitting you guys against each other just because of the novelty of these two black companies being on the rise at the same time, or how much of it might have just been, you know what, like let's play into this because they're going to talk about us, like let's go ahead and get them talking about us for free, right? Like, but for from your perspective, what was well, you've kind of mentioned it already, right? Like from me as an observer, it seems like you guys, your aim was not just to sort of be there, but to be there and to really push an Afrocentric message, and to really push positivity in a specific way for a Black audience. Um, but what did you make of sort of the media circus at the time?
Well, one of the things that I will attest to is that there was a media created beef between
Mm,
ANIA and Milestone. And I'll be honest with you, there are some things that we had valid criticism of Milestone.
mhm,
Okay. Um, and however, those criticism, as white media has a tendency of doing, is blowing it out of proportion.
mm,
Now, again, one of the criticisms that we had, and I'm not trying to delve into beefs here, but I'll
right.
just lay it out open. One of the things that we were concerned about, and we had criticisms about, is that some of the quality of the paper, specifically of Milestone books, were like newsprint.
Mhm,
While we made sure that our books had the best quality paper. So our criticism that we expressed was like, wait a minute, Milestone, you have the media machine of DC and Warner Brothers behind you, yet the quality of your books, the paper, the coloring, doesn't look as good as Image that has started to come out, or
mhm,
some of the other DC books that
mhm,
were out. We basically like, what's up with that? I mean, we don't understand.
mhm,
Um, so we had criticisms, and which were valid at the time. Um,
mhm,
but that didn't take away from the quality of the story. Dwayne McDuffie, I knew him. We did conventions together on occasion, as well as Dennis Cohen and others within the
mhm,
Milestone camp. Um, and, great guys. I mean, Dwayne McDuffie is one of the best writers in the game.
mhm.
When he passed, it broke my heart. Um, so unfortunately, the media took it and ran with it. And as I'm thinking about it, I compare it to the East Coast, West Coast rap thing. You
Mhm.
know, if you know rappers, and again, I'm not a rap historian,
Right.
I do know that a lot of that was blown out of proportion.
Yeah.
And there's nothing better for white media specifically to push is anything that shows conflict between black people.
Right.
And unfortunately, sometimes, if not all the time, takes away from our momentum.
Yeah.
So I'll throw this into the historical archives of your brain. Um, one of the members of, uh, of Milestone, he and I were talking right before our company went defunct. We were actually considering doing a crossover.
Mm.
And that was going to be my way of hushing up the media and beating them at their own game.
Right.
Because I knew if ANIA and Milestone came together and did a crossover and could at least collaborate,
Mhm.
that would shut and squash all of that.
Right.
And we'll all make money, you
Yeah.
see. So I've always had that mindset. But unfortunately, both of our companies, went defunct before we could actually see that off. And but that was one of the things that I wanted to see happen that unfortunately didn't come to fruition.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's important to sort of state, right? Just how much the media plays a hand in it, right? Even I'm looking at this article. I've got this Newsweek article in front of me, and the tagline on this article is "The Clash of the Black Comic Book Titans,"
Right,
right? And this is dated August 1993. Neither of your companies had even been publishing that long,
right.
right? Like y'all had just both stepped into the game, and they're like, "All right, fight head to head," right? Even there's this picture of Icon here, and it says Afrocentrist versus mainstreams, trying to put Zwana against Icon and Rocket. And I think that's just it's sensationalism, and we see it. I see it now on YouTube, right? Like it's so much easier to get the clicks when there's something negative involved, or you know,
But the thing is, that when you look at it for what it is, and again, this is my perspective, and I stand by it. You don't see an article like that with DC and Marvel.
right,
You don't see an article like that with DC versus Image. If you look at when it comes to our culture, you have Michael Jackson versus Prince.
right,
Why? Both of those are one of the top artists of all time.
hmm
But I remember seeing so many magazines. Who's better? Who's has a beef with who?
right,
You see that with black artists or black creators. I don't really see that with white counterparts. You don't see Elvis pitted against uh, Jerry Lee Lewis.
right,
you know,
right, yeah,
see, so it's all by design.
hmm
And what I've done or tried to do throughout my career is to avoid it at all costs, or try to do more collaborative works where we can show that as black people we can come together. A little do a lot, or a lot do a little to get the job done. And that's always been my focus.
absolutely. So ANIA was yourself, Eric Griffin, Nabil Haj, um, Alonzo Washington was there for a bit.
Yeah.
Uh, but there were a lot of you. And like you said, you guys sold 1 million copies a book, right? Like, so you guys made a splash. Um, what happened? What happened to ANIA?
Well, um, my perspective is um, different value systems when you get down to it.
Hmm.
What's the old saying? Uh, Too many chiefs, not enough Indians.
Uh-huh.
That old cliche. Um, that was a part of it. I had a certain vision for Purge and where I wanted to go, and Nabil has his, and of course Eric had his. And although we saw great success, we didn't really take a lot of time to discuss if our value systems actually align,
Hmm.
and that's important. You
Yeah.
see, for example, my books uh, rarely, if not at all, have profanity. Okay,
Hmm.
I don't like it. I don't think we have to use profanity to get the point across. Now, I do know as time has gone on, it's pretty much almost like a second language to a degree. But for
Right.
me, for my value system, I don't want Purge throwing out a lot of F bombs.
Hmm.
That's just how I built my character. Now, some of the other members felt differently about that, which is fine.
Hmm.
But what ends up happening, if I'm going to team up Purge, let's say with Zawana, okay?
Right.
I'm not saying Zawana was that type of character, but I'm just saying if I have him team up with Zawana, and there's going to be a conflict there with the creative aspect of it, but also with the character themselves because they don't align.
Right.
And what I mean by that is, you can have a Batman and a Punisher, and that can be a great story for maybe like a one-off. But if
Hmm.
you in a group where these are part of a unique combined universe, then there's always going to be some issues with how those characters can really interact because everybody owns their separate IP.
Yeah.
And that was part of the problem or the challenges. And also, just to be totally frank, a lot of us was very young back then. I was in my early 20s and still learning the business game and how to market. So there was a lot of things that we lacked in learning how to run our businesses that also caused us to kind of falter here and there.
Mm.
But again, sometimes you have to have the on-the-job training sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think we all grew from it. But I believe that one of the issues was the fact that our value systems just didn't really align.
Well, no, that's fair because you guys were, four guys from different parts of the country, and I mean, at that time, might as well have been different worlds completely. Um, which is not to say that you couldn't get along, right? Like we can get along as people,
Sure.
but value systems are value systems, and especially at that age, people can be stubborn, like, and you owned your property, so it's like I'll just take my ball and go home, like it could certainly be that way.
Well, excuse me, I'll give you a quick example. One of the things that we had, excuse me, let me get a drink of water.
Okay.
That was a um, a barrier.
Hmm.
Was I remember when we was at our height. Again, USA Today had came out, Newsweek, and all of those articles, and I was at San Diego Con, and we had at that time Kenner and every toy company coming to us to want to make toys or trading cards, right?
Hmm.
And since I was one of the only creators who was out there doing consistent traveling with conventions, they would come to me and say, "Hey, are you with the Near?" Yes, I am. Well, we would like to do a toy line. Oh, wow, that's great. Okay, so how do we get this done? Oh, okay, well, I can give you permission to do Purge, but I
Hmm.
can't speak for the other guys. What? We got 5 different, 6 different, 8 different people we have to talk to get the job done? Well, that's not going to work for us. We need to have everything under one umbrella,
Right.
you see? So that's what I meant by too many chiefs.
Hmm.
So that hindered us a lot. Now, we didn't know that was going to be that way going into it because we were new to the game. But I
Yeah.
realized, I said, man, if I'm partnered with people and we get a movie deal, then no company ideally is going to want to create 8 different contracts.
Right.
You see,
Right.
every individual person own their own IP.
Hmm.
So that taught me something. And that, of course, also contributed to our demise. We weren't able to really come to terms on things because we all want to do our different deals. Let's say my deal was a 70-30 split.
Hmm.
Okay. Well, my partner may want an 80-20 split.
Hmm.
You see, so what ends up happening, the company who's wanting to deal with us with toys or whatever, they walk out because there's too much differences in how we see things.
Hmm.
So again, it was a learning experience. I don't regret it at all, but it allowed me to um, be smarter moving forward as I continue my career.
For sure. And so I think this is a great point to kind of stop and have a teaching moment, right? And just to be very clear, this is not legal advice. I'm not a lawyer, but I think one way, because I know a lot of indie creators who are in this space now, and they'll team up from time to time, right? So just kind of thinking loosely of a structure that could protect you against something like that, right?
Mm,
Let's say a NIA, you establish a NIA as a separate company, right? You guys all want to own your individual IP. Cool. You own your individual IP, but you license that IP to a NIA. And you have to write out the terms of that license. So it's like you're giving a NIA the right to exploit this intellectual property for use in television, films, toys, games, or what have you. And then also in the contract, there would need to be a clause basically saying, or you guys appointing whoever the registered agent is going to be to
mm,
basically act on Ania's behalf. And
exactly.
so that what you're doing in that moment is you're giving that one person the power to say, whether it's a 60-40 split, a 80-20, whatever I decide that I'm going to agree to with this company, that's the deal for all four of us. And cool, right? Now, again, it still takes willing parties to do all that,
Mhm.
but that's a way that you can do it. You guys still own everything and you're moving forward. And that way, if you are that registered person, now you're at the con and you can do business with Kenner and not have to wait for the other four. You already got those agency rights.
Exactly. Now, again, that's something that we didn't know back then.
Right, right.
And I remember Dwayne McDuffie speaking about ANIA because we were all clashing. The media was pitting us against one another, and he said something that I thought, well, I felt offended by
Mm,
back then. But now that I'm older, 30 years later, I see the wisdom in what he said. And he said that when he looked at ANIA, he felt that we were doing comic books as a hobby and not as a business.
mm,
And I was offended. I'm like, man, I got my business registered. What are you talking about? But then when I look back on it, I see the wisdom of what he meant.
mhm.
So just what you said, if we had more business savvy at the time, and again, no fault to our to us as far as that was concerned.
Mhm.
We were learning, but we would have done exactly what you described. We would have licensed it to the company and went through that process. But we were five, six people who love superheroes, who want to do our own comics our own way, and we felt that doing it together, we would get farther. But again, there was a lot of business knowledge that we just didn't have. And I
Mhm.
went to business school, and there was still some things that were lacking,
Right.
once we launched. So, it made a lot of sense. So I toss my hat up to Brother McDuffie. He was definitely on point with that, and I learned a lot from that wisdom as I continue to build my company and at AMARA, which is my company now.
Yes. And so, you guys at ANIA, you went your separate ways. Are you still in contact with the other guys?
No, I have not spoken to any of those guys roughly in about, again, 30 years. I keep going with 30 because that's the anniversary, but
Mm,
I really haven't talked to any of them. I think the only one that I talked to, I would say at least no more, it had to be more than a decade ago. And that was Roger Barnes of Heru, because he was
yes.
part of ANIA as well. And I didn't exclude him because he wasn't important. Um, but he was also part of ANIA as well. And he was the last one that I spoke with. And again, it had been more than a decade ago now. I haven't spoken to any of the guys. And one of the things that I would love to do, if they happen to listen to this interview podcast, I know at a ANIA reunion would blow people's minds.
For
So
sure.
I would love to do that. And interesting enough, that's one thing that we did agree on, that we would never do anything ANIA without the other. We actually
Mm,
signed an agreement. So I'm not allowed to do anything with any of the other characters unless everybody is in agreement. So again, if they're out there listening to this, let's do that, and satisfy the masses and have a ANIA reunion.
that would be cool. I would certainly buy it. Um, so okay. And so obviously, the story of Purge doesn't end where the story of ANIA ends. So how do you go about just sort of continuing the legacy and publishing of Purge at post ANIA?
Well, after ANIA disbanded, I began a new company called AMARA, and I wanted to still continue to focus on my ancestral energy. So
Mm,
I chose the Swahili word AMARA, which means immortal
mm,
or eternal. And that's how I see myself as a creator and what I put out there to be eternal. Purge, I have no doubt is going to be around long after I pass on and move on to another level of existence.
mm,
So for me, I just went back to basics, learning more about business, um, learning how to build a better business plan, speak with investors, know the language. Again, wear those other hats. And there was a time for a few years that I was burnt out, started to have children, build a family, that type of thing. So I took a hiatus from it. Then around 2011 or 2012, I said, you know what, I need to get back to my passion.
mm,
So I reopened AMARA because I had
mm.
closed it, defunct at that time, and then I started AMARA Entertainment LLC, and alone, by myself, I was pretty much renewed, and I decided to, revamp Purge. So around 2016,
Mhm.
I was introduced to crowdfunding and Twitter,
Right.
Facebook, and all of that, and started to learn how to work that arena. and did a campaign, and then I reintroduced Purge, passed unspoken, the new direction,
Mm,
and I'm still working on that series now. As a little tidbit, once this campaign is over, revisiting Purge and the 30th anniversary celebration, we will be working toward creating a crowdfunding campaign for Purge Past Unspoken issue 3 to keep the series moving.
mm. And so with this sort of this new second wind, right, with AMARA Entertainment, uh, Purge has new life. What what different strategies are you employing now, right? I've seen you I want to say you had a partnership with like a museum. You've been working with different local organizations. But how are you distributing Purge? Because I guess so much of your story or what you've expressed has been like a desire specifically to see Black kids affected by this hero. And so it's like the crowdfunding is great and, social media is great. But I'm sure there's a part of you that's also like, let me go to the libraries, let me go, to the streets, so to speak, to make sure there's visibility there. So what different methods have you been employing over the years?
Well, one of the things I've employed, of course, like I said, is crowdfunding. I do also formulate my own website.
Mhm.
Now, I'll be honest, it is down right now because we're restructuring it. We're going to be improving it. So it'll be coming up soon with some whole new content, just to let everyone know in case they do visit and it's down. It will be up soon. But one of the things that I've learned to do is to really use the internet to have a global impact.
Mm,
Okay. I'm not with any distributorship like Diamond. So I'm looking at continually building my knowledge surrounding crowdfunding campaigns where I can be empowered so that people
mhm,
will come to me using these crowdfunding campaigns to buy my product. Now, the strategy is gain trust. I started out with a few Kickstarter campaigns when I was learning how to navigate them. And then we had COVID, which threw everybody into a tizzy.
mhm,
So now it's rebuilding again for a lot of us as creators. Because unfortunately, when crowdfunding started, there was a lot of kinks in it, a lot of bugs. A lot of people didn't get their product that they thought they would. So there was a lot of distrust out there. So I think for myself and other creators is gaining an audience, structuring your product to make sure that it's in the hands when you say it's going to be, to make sure that you continue to build your integrity. So crowdfunding is going to be a huge part of that for me. Um, so this first or this campaign I'm running now is sort of like a springboard for that for me moving forward. Now, eventually, I may go into distributing into comic book shops, but I feel that Purge is not only just special, and as far as I'm concerned, uh, that's a understatement.
mhm.
But I think that I see Purge as being unique, and I want him to be something that you just can't find anywhere, you know, and to use the crowdfunding campaign or platforms to be that place where you can look forward to getting the next issue, and so forth. And again, being mindful that Purge is not only it's not the only character within the Amara verse. There's so many more that I've created, hundreds of characters and stories that are yet to be told. So there's going to be a flood of wonderful stories coming from AMARA Entertainment LLC, utilizing campaigns, but also utilizing other resources such as conventions and things like that.
Mm.
So all of that is woven into my strategy.
Awesome. Awesome. Now you talked about sort of retooling Purge back in
Yes.
2016. What would you say are some of the key differences between Purge of today and Purge of yesteryear?
Well, Purge of Yesteryear, those who have read the books, we only came out with three: Purge Zero, Purge One, and then Purge Preview,
Mm,
which was another stab at revamping him. Now, um, I have changed the story or recon the story, I think it's the terminology we like to use these days,
mhm,
where he is a highly technological, advanced individual who has
mm,
created technology that not only he used to purify and as purge, we also help it to revamp and innovate Winston-Salem, North Carolina, which is where the story is placed.
Hmm.
Those who don't know. But in the story that I have actually developed, Winston-Salem has evolved into New Salem.
Mm.
And New Salem is the first techno city in America. And on top of that, it is predominantly populated by Black people. So the easiest way to explain that is think of Wakanda, but in America,
Mm.
with American politics and all of those things woven in. So when someone visits New Salem, which was Winston Salem, they also know Purge, or AKA his alter ego, Richard Kincaid, as one of the top technological minds of our century. And he is also looking to purify himself because he was abducted as a child.
Mm.
And a clandestine group put an implant in his neck that helps him to control his bodily functions, you see,
Mm.
and enhance
Mm.
his brain power, not only as a martial artist, not only as a technological inventor, but also it helps him to control the nanotechnology that he utilizes as he fights crime and evil as Purge. So the story has taken a real interesting direction over the years, and now Purge has continued to grow as that character who not only purifies himself but keeps the city that he protects purified by making sure that the technology that he helped created doesn't get in the wrong hands or spill out into the world and does even more damage.
Mm. Yeah, that's crazy. So Purge said, "Move over, R.J. Reynolds. I'm running this city now." That
Exactly.
is that is awesome. Now, man, so now I'm like, dang, I need to get the new Purge. I, I got old Purge. I need this new nanotechnology powered Purge. And I think that's a perfect segue to talk about this Kickstarter campaign. So here's what I'll do. Let me share the screen here. Um, I'm saying Kickstarter. This campaign is actually on Indiegogo,
It is.
and it is the Purge Revisited 30th anniversary celebration. And
Yeah.
so you guys can see it on the screen. By the time you are watching this, there's actually about 7 days left, but you're already almost 80% of the way to your funding goal,
Yeah.
um, which is awesome. But just let's look at some of the perks. So we've got Purge issue 2
Mhm.
and got Digital Explosion. So you got the Blackout issue 2, Purge issue 2, and a PDF. And then you've got physical copies, um, the inside the AMARA verse pack, which
Now that
has
one, if I can speak on that real quick, and that was a special one. Now that introduces some of the other superheroes in the AMARA verse that I mentioned. So if someone is interested in learning more about what's in store, and they may already have Purge issue 1 that came out in 2016, this will be a great opportunity for them to get introduced to some of the other characters
mm,
within the AMARA verse. And these are preview books, so it's a great starter pack for those who may be interested in learning more about the other heroes.
awesome, awesome. And then so let's talk about the Purge 30th anniversary. So because I see there's issue 2 in the rewards. What is the 30th anniversary special? Is that starting it from the beginning?
It starts from the beginning, and it has, of course, a brand new cover, but it has a extra backup story that gives insight into Purge's early years once New Salem was formed.
Mm,
And it has him pitted against one of his ongoing main antagonists, which is the character Threshold, which is on the cover.
got you. Okay. Very cool. Now, who did this cover? Because it looks.
The cover was done by Alan Goldman.
Mm,
Um, then it was painted by Diego, and I'm going to just say Diego because I don't want to butcher his last name,
mm,
but his name is should be on the campaign.
okay.
And he painted it, did a wonderful job.
Looks really good. And then we've got like just some news clippings just showing the history of Purge. Um, and even some of the articles that we mentioned earlier, even all the way up to the Epiphany Engine campaign, which just ended. And so got Blackout, the eradication protocols. That looks really cool.
Now I'll touch a little bit on that.
Okay.
Blackout was a team up book with Purge and the brother. And that character is not my character. That's the brother's owned by Jay Kelly. And we decided to do a crossover. And we have two issues of that done already. And basically, what's great about that particular story that I wrote, it chronicles the dilemma of New Salem being destroyed in the future.
Mm,
Brother is actually a time traveler, and he learns that New Salem is going to be destroyed again, like Tulsa,
mm.
but even worse. So he comes back basically in time to enlist Purge to help him to stop that from happening.
Got you. Very cool. We got Purge number 2 here. We've got some preview pages from the interior.
Yes.
I really like this lettering. Um, Man, this looks awesome.
Now the pages that you just saw
Mhm.
was illustrated by Nito Diaz,
Okay.
and the other pages, as you continue to stroll up, were um, illustrated by the Zong brothers, which are the main artists on the Purge books.
Okay. Nice. This book, I love this art style. It looks like it's taken straight out of an animated TV show. Like I could see this on my TV.
Well, that was the purpose. The Zong brothers um, love anime in
Mm.
general, and their style um, shows that. So when I saw their work, I said, if I work with them, I can not only have a comic book, but I can have a storyboard if I want to translate it to animation later.
Right. Right.
So they were able to, give me something that I can utilize in dual ways.
Nice. Man, this art looks really good. And so, I mean, I could look at this all day, but keeping going with the perks, we've got a purification pack. So that's a printed set. Looks like you get, was this all 3 issues?
You
Purge?
get the well, when I first reintroduced Purge after I
Hmm.
came off of my hiatus, I developed with Keaton Jones at the time. I was part of Kid Comics, and he illustrated the preview book, which is like 4 pages, kind of
Okay.
introduce you to Purge. That led to Purge issue 1, and then of course Purge issue 2.
Okay. So you get that, you get the preview and then the 2 issues
Exactly,
in
the
the
two full
purification
issues.
pack. Got you. Okay. And then the past, present, future is a graphic novel. What's that include?
Now that includes all of the books that I did in the 90s, every
Mm,
one, reprint, but I collected it in one volume. So if you weren't around or wasn't born when the books came out in the 90s, this is a perfect way to get all of them in one complete volume. And that way you can put it on your shelf and revisit Purge in the 90s while hopefully enjoying Purge present.
awesome. Now, so the past, present, future, it includes the 90s stuff. Does it also include the current stuff or is it just the 90s stuff?
Just the 90s stuff and some
Okay.
extra stories that were
Okay.
thrown in, but just the 90s.
Awesome. Okay. Cool. And then you can get the digital bundle. Okay. So then the purification bundle looks like this has issues 1 and 2 of New Purge, and then the Purge graphic novel containing all the 90s stuff for
Exactly.
only 30. That's crazy. Man, the Purge Blackout double impact. So you can, okay,
Now
the
that one
blackout.
has everything. If you want
Got
Purge
you.
issue 1, Purge issue 2, you got it. You get the preview, and then you get Blackout 1 and Blackout 2. So
Nice. So yeah, man, you guys, this campaign is going to end. Let's see. There's 15 days left, so this is ending. That's
August
next.
31st.
Okay. August 31st. So we got just a little bit of time left. Like I said, about a week from the time you guys are seeing and hearing this. So I got to make sure I do my edits real fast. So we got even more time for you guys to check this out. Because I don't want you to miss it. So I will make sure that I leave a link to this in the show notes and in the description of this video. Um, but it's on Indiegogo right now. And like I said, it's already with 2 weeks left. We're 80% of the way to the goal. So I believe this is going to fund, but you absolutely need to help it get there so we can get more of these books in our hands. So with all that said, I'm really excited about this campaign. I'm excited that Purge is still going 30 years later, and I'm really grateful to you for your time. If people are wanting to keep in touch with you or stay notified, stay aware of what you've got going on, where can they follow you?
Well, of course, I'm on Facebook. That seems to be my second home to a degree. But I'm also, well, let me start over. On Facebook, Roosevelt Pitt, but there's also a AMARA Entertainment Facebook page.
Okay.
Okay. There's an AMARA Entertainment Instagram, also Roosevelt Pitt. And I'm also on Twitter, well, X now,
Mhm.
under AMARA Entertainment and Roosevelt Pitt as well. Now, I will say this, so don't judge me too harshly. I am also on TikTok. So if you see a few videos and they seem kind of choppy, I'm just getting started. So be patient with me. I'm embarking on putting content on TikTok as well. So you can find me on TikTok. It should be either Roosevelt Pitt or Purge, Purge. I'm there as well.
Nice. Now, you know who you need to get on TikTok? You got to talk to Danny Quick. That is the
Yes,
that is the
yes,
TikTok man.
yes, he is. And I actually I got him on speed dial. So I owe him a call very soon to get some quick lessons on how to navigate that.
Nice. Nice. Well, Mr. Pitt, thank you again for your time. This was a great conversation. It was an honor to have you on, and you are welcome back anytime, sir.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a great honor and appreciation of you having me. Uh, I hope that we'll have more conversations as Purge becomes more and more a household name.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you guys, like I said, go ahead and back that campaign. It's on Indiegogo right now. The link is right down below or in the show notes if you're listening to this just audio. And I will see you guys in another episode real soon. Until then, stay safe, stay awesome, and read something dope today. Peace.